It's safe to say that mortgage rates likely aren't heading any higher after what we heard this week out of the Federal Reserve. Now, Jerome Powell testified in front of Congress this past week, and basically what he said is that inflation is starting to come down, although they're worried about it reigniting if they cut too soon. But now they're worried about sending the economy into a recession if they don't cut soon enough. I think he's laying the groundwork for a rate cut either in September or November of this year. But we will see what happens. Certainly, it doesn't seem like a rate hike is coming, and bond yields have started to drop, in my opinion, signaling that a rate cut is likely. So we're going to talk about what this means for the housing market. Of course, if mortgage rates come down, that's going to bring more affordability. The real question is, will we be in a recession, and will there be enough buyers out there to purchase properties? We're going to go through all of it in this video here and give you all the information we can to help you make the best decision with your home purchase or sale. Before we get into these articles, my name's Liam O'Reilly. I'm a realtor here in Vermont with Jerry Riley Real Estate, and all of my contact information's in the description. So if you have any real estate needs, reach out to me directly. Happy to help you, whether it's in Vermont or anywhere else across the US. So, all right, we're going into this first article out of Reuters talking about what Jerome Powell said in front of Congress this past week. Here's the first thing that I highlighted out of this article. We are well aware that we now face two-sided risks. We can no longer solely focus on inflation, Powell told the Senate Banking Committee on Tuesday. The labor market appears to be fully back in balance. So basically what he's saying is that based on the most recent jobs report that came out last week, and in my opinion, helped send the 10-year Treasury rate down from about 4.5% to 4.28, where it sits now, almost 25 basis points. The jobs report showed that unemployment sits at around 4.1% and jobs growth is slowing, with a majority of those jobs that were added in the economy were government jobs, which I don't think that's necessarily a sign of a strong economy. If the government is the number one employer adding jobs, you'd want to see that in the private sector if the economy was nice and healthy. But that's a topic for another video. Let's get on to what Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell said here. This is an analysis of Chair Powell's testimony here. His emphasis has shifted a bit towards a balance of risks within the Fed's mandate, said Christopher. The Fed needs to get ahead of the weakness in the labor market. It appears as if the foundation is being laid for a pivot in September. And in fact, that is what that's what people are betting on right now. After Powell's comments here, investors continued to put nearly a 70% probability on a Fed rate cut in September. Now, we haven't seen this drastically affect mortgage rates yet. We have seen the 10-year Treasury drop over this past week, and we've seen mortgage rates come down slightly. They were floating, at least on Nephew's website, between 6.75% and 7% for the past couple weeks or so. And now we see mortgage rates at 6.5% after the recent job data, and it's relatively unchanged after the Fed's comments. But once the Federal Reserve officially states that they're cutting rates, that's going to bring mortgage rates down. Remember, they don't need to cut rates in order to bring rates down. The market just has to believe that they will cut rates. And once we get an idea of where rates are going, how much they're going to cut, and how aggressively they're going to be with their rate cuts, that will dictate where mortgage rates are going. So one thing I wanted to mention here, when we're trying to think about what the Federal Reserve is thinking about when they're making their rate cut decision to help us understand where rates and the housing market are going. They're very concerned about inflation, but as I've talked about many times before, it appears like most inflation categories that are tracked by the Federal Reserve are under control. When we take a look at this chart, this is the year-over-year change, this column right here that's highlighted, May 2023 to May 2024, we see that all items not seasonally adjusted were up 3.3%. When we take a look at many of these categories, we have food at 2.1%, which is in the Federal Reserve's goal. We have some of these other categories. Energy at 3.7, which is a little high. That's primarily driven by electricity. If we think about the electricity inflation, that's not likely influenced by the Federal Reserve's interest rates. So this is not a category. If I was in the Federal Reserve making these decisions, I would not think electricity is the increase in electricity is driven by their rate policy, right? Electricity has gone up because there's been a huge shift in electricity to electric cars, to electric heat, that's putting more stress on our grids right now and causing the price of electricity to rise. And we see here some other increases. Fuel oil up 3.6%. Sure, that's a large increase year over year, but we see it's down 3.6% month over month, right? Pretty volatile commodity. The largest one and the most important factor, 36% of what the Federal Reserve is tracking, is shelter inflation. We see that's up at 5.4%. Of course, if you watch my videos in the past, you know that I think if the Federal Reserve drops their interest rate, that will actually lower shelter inflation as opposed to raise it and help with this overall CPI number. So what the Federal Reserve is trying to do is I think they're trying to keep the neutral interest rate, right? The rate that's not restricting or stimulating the economy. They're trying to lower that neutral interest rate so that when a recession hits, they can cut interest rates, help stimulate the economy, and help get things back on track. I really think that's their true goal. And now they don't want to send the economy into a recession, so they are thinking about cutting. But I think the talk about inflation, based on what I'm seeing in these numbers, I think it's more noise than it is actual facts about what they're doing. So back to the housing market, when the Federal Reserve eventually cuts rates, what's going to happen to housing? Well, let's take a look at where things are this week. This is the Redfin weekly market update that we're taking a look at now. We see here the median sales price is up 4.9% year over year to a new all-time high, $397,000 across the country for the weekly. This is the rolling 4-week average tracked by Redfin. So home prices are still up. We have homebuyer house payments. Obviously, those are way up. Pending sales are down. This is the big thing here. So if rates start to drop, we should see more affordability in the market, even without prices dropping, right? If interest rates drop, this monthly mortgage payment, the homebuyer housing payment right here, that's up 6.5% year over year, we should see that number start to decrease just by a drop in mortgage rates. You see they were using a 6.86% rate here when they came up with this number. You know, if you were to use NEFQ, that rate would be a little bit lower than even where it is now. And we see it's trending down, not because the median sales price is trending down, but because mortgage rates have trended down slightly over this past week, although it's still up 6.1%. So if we see housing become more affordable, if we see it's up 6.5%, not 6.1. If we see housing become more affordable, we should see if we see interest rates drop, we will see housing become more affordable to more people, which should bring more buyers into the market and help unfreeze where we are right now. Now, it's also going to bring more sellers into the market as interest rates drop because many sellers are holding on to their 3%, 4%, 5% mortgages that they don't want to give up and get a mortgage rate that's at around 6.86% or even 6.5%, right? If you have a 3.5% mortgage, you don't want to give that up and get a 6.5% mortgage for a home that is more expensive, much more expensive than what you're living in now, especially if you bought in 2020 or in 2021, right? Prices have shot up since then. So you'd be buying a way more expensive house and you would have a much more expensive interest rate, making your monthly payment extremely high. If we see interest rates start to drop, we'll see more sellers want to use the equity that they've built in their homes to upgrade, to move from that starter home into a nicer property, which should, reinvigorate the overall housing market. Now, how much activity will we see in the housing market? That's really tough to say, and it's going to depend on if we have a recession, right? If the Federal Reserve holds their rates too high for too long, sends the economy into a recession, we see unemployment rise, then we're not going to see housing shoot up like crazy, and we're not going to see a ton of activity in the housing market because there just won't be enough people who have jobs, who are making enough money and can afford to purchase property. But if they're able to pull off their soft landing that they talk about and keep the economy rolling, cut interest rates just in time, then we could see the housing market really start to spike up as more people, who have jobs can now afford to buy homes. So That's what's going on. That's the information I see. Use this information to the best of your ability to make the best decision for your home purchase or sale. Of course, I'm a realtor. All my contact information is in the description. I am here to help advise you, especially if you're in Vermont with your home purchase or sale. So if you have any questions, reach out to me directly. I'd be happy to learn more about your specific situation and help you. And don't forget to leave a comment. I love learning from you folks. Let me know what you think about this analysis and what you thought about this press conference. I learned so much from you guys in the comment section. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.